Senate, District 25, we have incumbent Democrat Bob Duff taking on Republican Mark D'Amelio. On to District 34, we have Republican incumbent Len Fasano taking on Eileen McKean, she's a Democrat. State House, we have District 30, Joe R. Siemowitz, Democrat, taking on Stephen Balashevsky. For District 114, we have Democrat Mary Waylander taking on incumbent Republican Themis Claridis. On to the Office of Attorney General, we have Democrat William Tong taking on Susan Hatfield. And for the Office of Treasurer, we have Democrat Sean Wooden taking on Republican Thad Gray. Now, those last two races, we're seeing the departure of incumbents who have been in office for 20 years. So these two are going to be pretty important toss-ups. Moving on to the U.S. House, the 4th Congressional District, we have Jim Himes taking on Republican Harry Aurora. In the 5th District, we have Democrat Johanna Hayes taking on Republican Manny Santos. And for the U.S. Senate, we have Democrat Chris Murphy taking on Republican Matthew Corey. Back to you guys.
You'd have to be living under a rock to not hear about fake news, information from unreliable or malicious sources. But do you know about deep fakes? Artificial intelligence that uses face-swapping technology. Deep fakes show things that never happened, but you'd swear are real. Let's take a look.
Anything you say and do can be used against you in a court of law. Everyone knows that one. But what if you didn't say it, and they have a recording of you? What if the one reliable source of video evidence is no longer a safe and accurate source of information? Well, welcome to the world of deep fakes, where the right people can make it sound and look as though you're saying something you never actually said, all on video. But surely, I'd be able to tell a fake from the real thing, right? Well, it might be harder than you think. Take a look at this video from Obama BuzzFeed uploaded.
Even if they would never say those things.
So, deep fake or reality? Let's take a look.
Someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele.
How is this possible, you may be asking yourself? Well, by using facial tracking and sound editing technology, they can mimic your voice and facial movements. And this technology isn't even that hard to get a hold of. That facial tracking tech is the same found in those fun Snapchat filters everyone likes to use. And the vocal editing software is becoming a commercial product from Adobe called Voco. It's a scary reality, especially for public figures like politicians or celebrities whose likeness is on screen all the time. Major video websites are starting to realize the threat and take actions to warn users. Surprisingly enough, one of the frontrunners of this movement is none other than Pornhub. Since deepfakes can be used for creations like, quote, revenge porn, the site is putting in strict policies to attempt to stop the harmful use of people's likenesses on their website. The future of false accusations is here. Only in this future, the line between truth and falsehoods has blurred dramatically. So in a time when anyone could be set up to say anything, remember to take everything with a grain of salt. If a public figure says something outlandish, take the time to look into it. Do your research. Because while technology can be used to transfer information more efficiently, it can also be used to transfer information incorrectly.
So you can't believe your eyes nor your ears anymore. While we're talking about politics, what do you think is going to happen now concerning fake news and deep fakes?
I think especially with deep fakes, we could see a future of politicians and public figures saying things that they never even said. It's a dangerous road that we're kind of heading down with this kind of technology, although it's helpful for maybe entertainment. I do think it could prove poorly for the field of politics.
Well, are people going to believe it?
I think that really is dependent on the future of technology. That's why I don't think we'll see it now, because the technology still is kind of waning here and there, but definitely down the road, as pixels start to get better and better and the picture starts to look really crisp, I think it's going to start to really seem like it's real.
You think people don't believe it?
Yeah, I think right now there's a lot of ways to differentiate this technology, and you can see in the picture quality that it's not quite real. It's fairly obvious in most cases, but as time goes on, as it becomes more refined, this could seriously become a big issue. And as we've seen, Russia interfering in our elections with outright news stories, edited pictures, as well as many other actors, this could be an evolution into serious problems with fake news.
But is it fairly obvious?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is at the moment you can tell, but in the future, as this becomes more refined, it's going to be very hard.
Look, you can tell if you're looking. However, didn't someone believe that Hillary Clinton was running a child sex ring in the basement of a pizza parlor that had no basement? I mean, people believe what they want to believe. It's called confirmation bias.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, to talk to that, I definitely think if people want to believe a candidate did or did not do something, they're going to try and convince themselves in most ways that they did or didn't do those things. I'd have to agree with you there on that.
I think we see these viral videos, viral campaigns going in both directions, though. Sometimes they take off, and then just as quickly, people realize it's fake. You know, reputable sources come out explaining to people that whatever they're reading is not quite true, and then the thing usually falls apart. So,
if only that
well,
happened.
yeah, not in every case, not in every case, but
Well,
we
it might not be
do
every
see it
case,
happening.
yeah.
I think the thing with deepfakes at the moment, though, is we haven't seen any large-scale malicious use of the technology. So that's for the future to tell.
Absolutely, I'd have to agree. In the future, we'll see a little more maybe. But right now we have Jason Cementilli in the field in Newtown. Jason, are you there for us?
I am here, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So who are you covering during this election cycle for now in the next 2 weeks?
For this election cycle, I am covering the Senate race between Senator Chris Murphy and Matt Corey.
And what are the biggest things we're hearing from both of those candidates right now?
Some of the biggest policies are education, gun violence, and lastly, immigration.
And now, how do both of them kind of feel towards those? I know they're both, you know, Democrat, Republican. What are they really saying? What are we hearing from them?
From Senator Murphy, with education, he wants to provide students with a quality education, whereas Matt Corey feels that parents should have the choice to send their children to a private school, public school, or charter school. In regards to immigration, Senator Murphy feels that we should tighten border security, but provide a fair path to citizenship, whereas Matt Corey feels that we should tighten border security, but provide or shut off the...
All right, well, thank you for checking in with us, Jason.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think immigration is definitely one of the biggest things and education. We heard both from the debate last week, especially between Manny Santos and Johanna Hayes. That's been a big talking point with this election.
Yeah, no doubt, and we can see in that race right there between Chris Murphy and Matt Corey. Chris Murphy is one of the biggest voices on the national scale against the current moves of the Trump administration. He was down on the border visiting children in the detention centers. He's been very vocal about his opposition to Trump's policies, and it does seem like that's giving him national attention. And he's also got a huge following in the state as well. You know, he's an incumbent. He's got that behind him. So I don't know how much of a chance Matthew Corey is going to stand in this particular race. I think Chris Murphy's a pretty solid lock.
I'd have to agree with you there. I think Connecticut still really wants that Democratic lead right now. I think that's really their response to the 2016 election is really they want more of Democrat in power.
Yeah, at least on the national level. Mm-hmm. We'll see how the state races fare, but the other thing to take into consideration is the state and local income tax was reduced for Connecticut in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So there is probably certain Connecticut residents who are worried about that, the fact that they can't quite get as much money off their taxes, which is a huge issue in Connecticut, and they want to elect Democrats who are in opposition to another tax cut like that, potentially.
Yeah, do you think there's been a little discussion about the minimum wage and among many candidates, and do you think that that kind of has a bearing on who we're going to see voted in, you know, how their stance is on the Connecticut minimum wage?
Yeah, it definitely is. And once again, we see that economics are really taking the forefront in a lot of Connecticut races. And the minimum wage is one solution to that. You know, the idea being that people will get paid more if you increase the minimum wage. I think a thing that a lot of people don't take into account is the side effects of that. Businesses having to pay more for their employees means they won't necessarily hire as many people. And they're going to have to potentially increase the cost of the goods they're selling or the services they're providing. So it's a solution that, when it comes to mind, it seems to make sense. But I think there's just as many people who hear that and have a negative view of that.
Well, the money doesn't only go there. Most of it goes to the people who own the company, the shareholders, that top 1% or the top 3% who own most of the things in this country, as opposed to the bottom 97%. I think something that we have to look at is that the people at the top, and we're talking right now about cutting money in businesses and taxes and all that, and it goes across the board when we talk about things like healthcare, everything like that. I think in general we have to consider redistribution of wealth. And I don't mean take the money and give it to all the poor people. What I mean is that the people at the top who have the most money in this state and in this country have to stop being so greedy. And we do that through tax cutting up at the top, not just the middle and lower classes.
Well, if you're talking about the minimum wage specifically as
Sure.
an avenue of getting more money to the people at the bottom, the fact is it adversely affects small and middle-sized businesses to an adverse amount.
Well, we actually have something prepared for our Connecticut tolls and the big discussion about it. So let's see that.
If you're a Connecticut resident, you may or may not have heard of the possibility of tolls appearing on local roads and highways throughout the state. Now, this has become a very controversial issue for both Connecticut residents and Connecticut government officials. But what are the real pros and cons of paying to use the roads? We were given the opportunity to sit down with Ridgefield First Selectman Rudy Marconi to give his perspective on the positive aspects of tolling.
We got rid of tolls years ago, and people are definitely opinionated about it. They're either for or against. I happen to be a person who has been in favor of it.
We were also given the opportunity to sit down with Republican State Representative William Duff, who strongly opposes the introduction of tolls to the state.
I am totally against the idea of putting any form of tolls in Connecticut at all. This is just another tax, but it's a real insidious tax placed upon the working people of Connecticut.
It's a user fee. Some people call it a tax. Oh, it's just another way of taxing. Well, then a ticket for the train is yet another way of taxing. A ticket for an airplane is yet another way of taxing. If you're going to put tolls on the roads, it's no different than paying for a ticket on a train, paying for a ticket on a plane. It's a user fee.
The type of tolling stations they want to put in will eventually lead to congestion pricing.
If you think tolls are diverting traffic, tolls, you don't slow up for tolls. People don't even know where they are today. It doesn't have any impact on traffic. We need to generate revenues in order to take care of our infrastructure.
Although their attitudes regarding the tolls contradict one another, Marconi and Duff both agree we shouldn't be conducting any more studies about the issue.
$10 million for a fourth study on tolls. Tolls have been studied ad nauseum. You're not going to get any new information that hasn't already been put forth in the previous 3 studies.
The study was done. It cost taxpayers $1 million. Today we're hearing that Governor Malloy wants to allocate $10 million to do another study. We're studying it to death. We're beginning to study the studies, and that's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the state. It's a waste of money. Either we're going to do it or we're not.
Those in favor of tolling argue that we need to collect more revenue that can be used to fund the necessary maintenance and upkeep of our roads.
Due to the crisis, financial crisis that our state is in now, and the lost revenues we've experienced, we need to replace some of those revenues because the state can never work its way out of the problem we're in by eliminating expenses.
Duff says he questions the validity of where the state claims this money is actually going to go.
If we implement tolls, and I want to be clear about this, there will not be any increase in the amount of money spent on infrastructure. That is not the plan for the Hartford politicians. It is a lie that they've been telling to the public.
Marconi and many others feel that far too many people are using our roads in comparison to the amount that contribute to the revenue collected.
We have traffic that comes from New York through Connecticut to get to Massachusetts to Boston. Everyone collects but Connecticut. And they're ruining our roads. They need to become a participant in taking care of our road.
The development of Connecticut tolls has been put on hold for the time being.
It'll be interesting to see because usually with a new governor you may see all new people in various commissioner positions. If we have an administration that's aggressive in terms of supporting it and wanting to get something done, then I think that dialogue will be moved to the top of the list.
This has been Alana Hill with WCSU Election Connection.
And we actually have Joe on the line from Danbury. Joe, are you there?
Yeah.
And what are you calling us for, Joe?
Well, I'm on YouTube. I didn't even know you guys existed or that there was this show. How often do you do this?
We're actually going to be doing it tonight, next Tuesday, and the night of the election.
What times?
We're going to be streaming this week from 7 to 9 p.m., next week again from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., and on election night from 8 to midnight with the results.
Oh, so it's Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll keep watching. I'm really glad you're doing this. You know, I'm a former New York resident, and like everybody else, I hate taxes, but, you know, in New York State, we pay tolls, and it helps the infrastructure. So, you know, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be voting for the guy who's behind this, or the woman who's behind this. I'm going to vote for the tolls. So thanks for covering it.
Thanks for calling, Joe.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I am a New York State, New York City resident too. I live in the Bronx. But let me tell you, it is 9 miles to my dance class in Manhattan. And when I shop around, we're talking about money going into the state of Connecticut, where I could take class, or New York City, I add in, and I have Easy Pass, that $5.76 it costs me to go over that bridge. It's real. If Connecticut puts in tolls, people are going to think like I think. How much is the entire package going to cost in order for me to get there? That's something that's really interesting. People are going to lose out on their smaller businesses because of tolls. Understand that, because we live in the tri-state area where you have 3, if you want to add Massachusetts, 4 states close together. And people have to travel to go to these different places. It can cost me $15 to go over the George Washington Bridge to go see my mother in New Jersey.
Sounds like you have a serious bone to pick about that.
I sure do.
But yeah, I mean, tolls are such a complicated issue because the arguments for them are strong. As we heard in that, it can be viewed as a user fee, and that does make a lot of sense. But at the same time, Connecticut residents are sick and tired of getting taxes put on everything they do. And like you just said, when they think about the idea of having to pay a toll on the way to work, essentially paying another tax on the way to work, they're not excited about the prospect. But we do have an issue with infrastructure in this state. Could it be the solution?
No doubt.
I think Will Duff brings up a good point in saying that we don't know that the money collected from the tolls is actually going to be spent on the roads. And we see, interestingly, from both sides of that argument right there, even though they disagreed on whether or not we should be implementing tolls, they both agreed on the fact that the toll study is a terrible idea and another example of wasteful government spending in our state. So,
well, yeah, it is an interesting thing seeing from both sides, yeah, and it's, you know, we'll have to find out more as more talks about tolls increase. But right now, we have Selina Benjamin in Waterbury. Selina, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
And now, Selina, who are you covering tonight?
I'm covering Joanna Hayes.
And now, what exactly are we hearing from Johanna Hayes this close to the election?
Well, she's very excited to keep promoting all the things that is built on her platform, the things that she strongly believes in, as education, prostitution, immigration, and gun control law.
And what would you say is her biggest, I guess, talking point?
Definitely would be education, being that she has a strong education, that she is a history teacher, and that she had won the child award. I feel like that is a strong point, but she also has important opinions and gun control, and I believe in the dreamers, the no-fly, no.
All right. Well, thank you for checking in, Selina.
Thank you.
You know, it was interesting to see last week Manny Santos and Johanna Hayes talk about everything that they did, and I think we had a pretty good prediction, you and me, as to what they were going to talk about, you know, when it came to healthcare, immigration, the economy, gun control, all really big things for the state.
Yeah, absolutely. We knew going into it was going to be an interesting debate, and like we talked about before, it really boiled down the national conversation to the 5th Congressional District between these two candidates. Manny Santos being a serious Trump fan, absolutely, and Johanna Hayes in the exact opposite camp. So we saw them talking about gun control, we saw them talking about immigration and healthcare, which is the single biggest issue in these current midterm elections on the national scale. So it's going to be interesting to see how the race turns out. Jahana Hayes currently has a strong lead. She definitely has a bigger following. She's got a lot more funding, which helps as well.
Absolutely.
But Manny Santos is putting up a fight. He's trying to get his name out there.
He sure is. Yeah. I really think he's trying to win it this time, to win this certain election. We have Joseph Oliveira standing by in Hartford.
Okay.
Joseph, how you doing in Hartford?
Good to hear from you.
It's good to hear from you too. So, Joseph, what exactly are you doing in Hartford right now?
Well, we're about 5 minutes away from Vib's Uptown nightclub in Hartford, in the Hartford Public Library. The nightclub is where Oz Griebel's team will be on November 6th, on Tuesday, awaiting the election results that night.
And how's it really looking for Oz right now? I know we talk a lot about Ned and Bob, but we really don't hear that much about Oz.
Well, just today at around 3 o'clock, Sacred Heart University released their most recent poll of the popularity among Connecticut voters of each of the candidates. Oz Griebel, unfortunately, fell out around 15%. Ned Lamont obviously leading that at 39%, and Bob Stephan Auskey trailing just behind him at 36%. He's going to have to do a lot of extra campaigning. Unfortunately, the nomination of the Independent Party of Connecticut hasn't gone to him. It's actually gone to Bob Stephan Auskey, a Republican. So we'll have to see, and hopefully for his campaign, he'll be able to pull something off before the 6th.
Do you think that 2 weeks is enough time for him to do anything, or for his campaign team to come up for something?
You know, he's going to have to do a lot in the way of coming up with some policy platforms, which there may not be enough time to do before the election. You've got a lot of animosity around issues like taxes and minimum wage. Oz Griebel, for example, has come up with tapping into the state's rainy day fund in order to balance the deficit. And I think the election is going to show whether that has resonated well with Connecticut voters or not.
Absolutely. I'm going to have to agree with you there. Thank you for checking in with us, Joseph, and we'll see you in the coming weeks.
All right, back to you.
He brings up a good point. You know, I think everyone wants to try and fix the economy on all, I guess, 3 sides, but mainly we're seeing the 2 sides, Democrat and Republican, and I don't think it's that great of an idea, the proposed dipping into the rainy day fund. What are your thoughts on that proposal, David?
Well, I think the most interesting thing with Oz Griebel in particular is that he's got 50% of the vote. Or at least 15% of the popularity. That's not a small number, really, in the grand scheme of things.
That's bigger for a third party. That's
and the biggest effect of that is he's drawing votes away from one of these 2 candidates, or both of these candidates.
You don't think he's pulling more from the right?
I don't know. I mean, considering the fact that Stephan Auskey definitely has the support of the Republican base. And he's got the support of the Independent Party as well. So he's in a pretty strong position. I'd be curious to know where those votes are coming from for Oz Griebel, but he's definitely having a huge effect on this race.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how do you feel about you know, Oz and his 15%?
Who's supporting him? And why?
That's my question.
That is the big question.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because if he is pulling from both sides, what is it that is attractive to each of those candidates on either side that they're going to say, forget it, I don't want mainstream politics the way they were, the Democrats, the Republicans, the right and the left, I'm going with Oz.
I feel like maybe it's the younger generation, kind of the term, you know, voting their confidence, or their conscience, excuse me. You know, there's all this talk of, you know, we're tired of the 2-party system, we want something more inclusive. So I think he's really pulling, I'd say, from a millennial, maybe a Gen X point of view.
And not even young people necessarily. We see a huge trend nowadays where people are so fed up with politics. I talk to people all the time who say, I just don't bother to follow along because I get too annoyed.
Right,
I get too annoyed with this.
Absolutely. So, it's like that's all we see in the news these days.
Yeah.
It's like if you tune into the news, you know, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, it's just politics television.
But isn't it jumping from the fire to the frying pan, or the frying pan to the fire? I don't like what's going on, so I'll take anything.
And I think that's what it is, really. I think it's a protest vote, really, against both of the other candidates.
But then, you know, even if it being a protest vote, you're going to see some hurt on both of the partisan sides. You're going to see.
Absolutely. You know, and that's going to be the biggest effect. He's drawing votes away from either one of these guys. It's going to benefit someone. It's going to hurt someone else. And I don't think we really see Stephan Auskey or Lamont really trying to capitalize on those middle-of-the-ground voters to a huge extent.
They both have very polar positions on everything. You know, again, on the national scale, boiling down to a local level, we're really seeing the very blue Democrat, and we're seeing a very conservative, you know, a very Trump Republican even.
Although, interestingly, I don't think Stephan Auskey has voted in many years. He's lived overseas. He's lived in other states. He only recently moved back to the state. So his voting record isn't as clear as many of the other candidates we talk about, but he's definitely running on a position of a conservative Republican. I don't know if that's really his viewpoint historically, though. But he might be seeing it as something that's going to get him popularity in the state, especially somewhere where the economy is doing so poorly. Talking about jobs, talking about decreasing taxes is a very popular thing to do right now.
I think it's very tantalizing for the voter, but I don't know if it has much substance to it, though. You know, what can he do in terms of that?
What's his game plan?
What's his game plan? His game plan is to turn Connecticut from a completely business-unfriendly state to a state that creates business growth, allows people to stay in the state because they will actually have jobs and won't be taxed to death. And that's really kind of the same rhetoric you're hearing from a lot of Connecticut Republicans.
Very abstract rhetoric, yeah.
I wouldn't say abstract, though.
Well, abstract in terms of, you know, it's a very idealistic kind of thing. We're going to fix the broken state.
In a way, but we've already seen on the national level, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has had a major positive effect on the economy.
For now.
Well, we can only talk about now, can't we?
Well, no, we can talk about the future because, number one, Trump really did come in, and I think you would concede this, come in on a well-running economy. Because the jobs reports have shown that while Trump is taking credit for all these new job numbers, et cetera, that they're really not that different from what was happening in October 16.
No, it's an interesting point, but the fact is the rate of growth in the economy has shot up dramatically under Trump.
And there's a lot of different factions that go into that, not just who the president is. I will give Trump credit for that you do have that confidence in the economy. But what I'm really saying is, hold on. Is that economies go up, economies go down.
Yeah, well, there's certain countries that have been more successful than others. Australia has managed not to have a massive downturn for many years.
No, I'm talking about the United States and their history, their economic history.
But it is possible, theoretically at least, to have a constant rate of growth. And I'd say the biggest, I will concede this, the biggest issue with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is that it has allowed the national deficit to grow because we are not meeting those funding requirements for a lot of government programs. So we're still in massive debt. It's increasing that debt. We've got to cut government waste in so many places, on the national level and on the state level. And I think that's another thing Republicans here are talking about, is the amount of waste in our state at the moment.
Well, where in Connecticut do we see the waste? Yeah. Where are we hearing that there is waste in Connecticut?
Well, we just talked about the toll study that was being implemented by Ned Lamont.
$10 million?
Yeah, $10 million to study tolls. And they brought up a great point in that news package, saying that tolls have been studied to an incredible extent already. We've already got information on tolls. This is not something that's necessary at all. And why do we need to be doing this? Connecticut residents look at that and say, what are they doing with my money? Because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. This is Connecticut taxpayers' money, and they want it to be spent efficiently and on things that they will actually derive benefit from.
Everybody does. Everybody wants their money spent efficiently, correct?
Yeah.
Right and left. Now, the thing is, what I fear about saying this is a terrible study, it's wasted $10 million, that you create this kind of conspiracy theory that there are factions within the government wasting our money. It's been done on a federal level and on a local level.
Yeah.
When we take a look at this and we say, oh, it's a waste, it's terrible, I want to know evidence-based.
Yeah. And
where we are wasting money. I want to see the facts, I want to see the figures, and I want to see specifics.
I think that's really important. Yeah, I think we really need to see from every side the specifics of what we need to do. And right now, actually, we have Monty Frank on the phone. Monty, are you there?
I'm here.
Now, Monty, what can you really tell us about what Oz kind of feels like in terms of how he wants to fix our current economic situation?
It's funny. I'm out in the other part of the state, out in Hampton, and we're with a group of about 50 people asking that very question. You know, our approach to government is a little bit different than the other candidates because we bring together a former Democrat, me, and a former Republican, Oz, on a nonpartisan basis to roll up our sleeves and try to solve the problem. As you all know, I mean, Connecticut right now is on a fiscal cliff. We've got serious financial issues. We've got about $80 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. We have a $4.6 billion deficit over the next 2 years. And it's going to require some serious people with serious experience in the state to bring people together to solve those problems. So, you know, I can kind of run you through the nuts and bolts of it if you want, or I can just kind of give you an overview.
So, Monty, as the lieutenant governor for the independent side, do you really feel that the toll system is a good idea for this state?
Within the context of a greater discussion about how we solve our transportation strategies, yeah. I mean, I live in Fairfield County. Whenever I have to go down to Stamford, I cringe because I know it's going to take me 2 hours to get from Newtown or Danbury down to Stamford. So, you know, Fairfield County is the third most congested area in the country. It's an area of potential economic growth for our state, and yet we're choking it off. So, you know, the first thing I would do is reappoint the Transportation Strategy Board, which Oz chaired under John Rowland. Oz is going to chair it. And what that board did was it brought in the private sector from all areas of the state to come together and develop transportation strategies. You know, what are the priorities? And then develop a funding source. And if you look at the funding source, limited tolls has got to be part of the equation. Otherwise, we're going to continue to suffer with subpar roads, with congestion, and we're going to, our ability to grow jobs, which is our #1 priority, is going to be infringed.
And now we just spoke that public polling, you know, about 15% of voters are going towards Oz Griebel. And how do you think, or I guess why do you think he's getting those votes? What's really drawing the voter into him?
Because people are uninspired by the major party candidate. Neither one of them has an ounce of the experience in Connecticut that either Oz or I do. And they're tired of the political bickering. They're tired of the red team versus the blue team, where win is defined by defeating the other person's bill rather than by compromise and driving forward legislation that's going to improve people's lives. You know, I'm really tired of hearing about the red wave or the blue wave. You know, what about the red, white, and blue wave? Why isn't it a win when we all win together to solve our serious problems instead of defeating the other person's bill?
Now, do you guys have anything planned for the remaining weeks during this election cycle?
We're going to work our tails off. You know, I'm going at about 4 or 5 hours a night asleep. I started my day this morning in Bridgeport on the train platform. I went to the Center of Family Justice to hear about the legislative agenda that's going to improve rights of women, to defeat, you know, bring down the levels of domestic violence, sexual abuse. Went up to Torrington for a task force presentation on the opioid crisis. You know, went to New Britain to have a meeting with the mayor. Had a couple meetings in Hartford, and now I'm out in Hampton, which is practically Rhode Island. But you know, we're going to be crisscrossing the state, meeting with students, meeting with constituents throughout, so that we get our message out and make sure that come November 7th, after we win, we've got a big base that we can draw upon to make sure that people stay engaged as we move the state forward.
Now, is there anything you want to tell us here, or maybe any voters watching, any last-minute things that you want to tell them about, you know, why you deserve their vote?
Yeah, and I want to address this particularly to students. You know, I worked for a long time in Danbury. I'm very familiar with WestCon and the rest of the system. One of the key things that we're going to have to focus on is, you know, how do we keep your generation, and I have 2 daughters, in the state? You know, how do we create opportunities that will grow jobs and have a vibrant community so that people want to stay here and live their life here? So, you know, right when we leave here, we're actually going over to UConn to watch a Red Sox game with some people who have committed to our student cabinet. I've been to practically every university in the state meeting with students, and I'm going to continue to do that, not just over the next 14 days, but after we're elected. The student cabinet is going to grow. I'm going to chair it as lieutenant governor to make sure that your generation has a voice right into the governor's office, so that we know, not by guessing, but by actual experience, what this vital constituency needs, wants, expects, in government so that we can make the appropriate decisions to keep you here.
Time, and I wish both you and Oz luck in the election.
Yeah, and anytime you want to have me on campus, I'd be happy to come. Just shoot me an email.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
They've got a heck of a race ahead of them.
They do.
They really do.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are encouraging words. I think it might have been important for some people to hear that, maybe there is another option in this election.
Well, one of the interesting things I think he said is that, or his characterization of state politics, saying it's red versus blue, people are just trying to defeat each other's bills to get a win. I don't know if that's necessarily the right way to frame it. I think, as we saw with him, he's addressing all the same issues as the other two candidates, as Bob Stephan Auskey and Ned Lamont. They're all addressing the same issues, but they differentiate on how to solve those problems. So when it comes to legislation, I don't think people are just out there maliciously trying to attack the other party's bills. I think they fundamentally have a different viewpoint in how to solve the problem, and they think that one way or another way is not the correct solution.
I think it's both. I think that, of course, that's always been the most important thing in politics, is how do we get it done, right?
Absolutely.
What's the game plan? However, I would say in this current political climate, are people attacking other people's bills just because they're on the other side?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
yes.
Especially on the national scale. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we're going to take a quick break here for now. We'll be right back.
Election Connection.
Pretty exciting night.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to Live Election Connection.
Welcome back to Election Connection.
It's Election Connection.
All of the late-breaking poll numbers and the stories as they develop.
It's okay to talk to the other side. It's okay to work with the other side. We haven't had enough of that.
People will say that this has become one of the most personal campaigns and governor races so far in history.
The Republican candidate shot himself in the foot.
I don't know if she's desperate.
Tonight's a very, very important night because the balance of power can shift.
First of all, if they have a child here, it's an anchor baby. That child's an American citizen.
Anchor baby.
Right. Well, that's the legal name for it.
I'd like to call it a baby.
You're not going to like what I'm going to say.
No, it doesn't matter whether I like it.
What's going to happen?
Clay Cope, he's a very staunch defender of the Second Amendment.
So tonight I'm going to be giving an overall analysis of the current outlook of the election.
We're going to go to a caller right now.
Your live and local source.
Live Election Connection.
Election Connection.
Welcome back to WCSU's Election Connection. Right now, we're going to throw it over to Paul Taschereau for the weather.
Good evening, everyone. It was certainly an interesting day weather-wise, not necessarily here in Danbury, but across parts of the state we were tracking showers and some thunderstorms, some of which produced some small hail up in Mansfield, Connecticut in the northeast corner, and even some wind damage. And going across the border into Rhode Island, likely damage from a tornado in Lincoln, and even a few water spouts across Cape Cod. And this is all in association with the cold front that is moving through, and when that does, it's going to usher in much cooler temperatures and much drier weather over the next few days. It'll also be rather gusty as well Wednesday and Thursday, but the biggest headline, we are tracking the potential for a storm this weekend, and we'll get to that in just a second. Let's go over to the next graphic on the surface map. Here's this cold front off to our west. This was responsible for those showers and thunderstorms which moved through parts of the state today. But across the central part of the country, we have high pressure, and that's going to dominate our weather over the next few days. Now let's get into this weekend. We're tracking a rather complex winter storm right here on the next graphic. One scenario is to the south and east. That'll give us colder solution, perhaps some snow. If we go over to the next slide, another possible track is a track up the coast, which would filter in warmer air and mean rain. So be sure to check on the weather over the next few days. But the Danbury forecast for tonight, we'll see temperatures in the low 30s, and it'll be quite chilly as well, which bring it on to the desk.
Thanks, Paul. Now, it's come to light that the state colleges, some of the state colleges and universities are going to actually be setting the tuitions for the coming years, as the Board of Regents are going to be meeting next spring to discuss a few options. I, for one, think that maybe having a frozen-in rate, if you come in as a freshman and tuition is X amount of dollars. I think by the time you're a senior, for that class specifically, it should still be that amount. It could get tricky with transfer students, but I think that's a good start, because we're starting to see dramatic increasing tuition prices, and I think it'll give the student a break if it's at least not that much of a worry for the 4 years that they're attending an undergraduate.
Well, there are 4 options, are there not?
There are.
So the first one is to freeze it.
Right.
When a freshman comes in, to freeze that tuition rate. What are the other 3?
So the other 3, there's the flat fee rate guarantee. You know, they pay the same rate. That was the one. There's, you know, free education overall. You know, state-funded education.
Well, nothing in life is free.
No, that, you know, when it comes to
although
economics.
some of the new democratic socialists would beg to differ on that.
We'll get there. But those are 2.
There's the free last semester rule, where it's almost a forgiveness program, where if you've stuck with the school for long enough, you actually will be, I guess, refunded or rebated that last semester, so you don't have to worry about it, and you actually get some tuition back. And then there's a promise program where the education system would receive, statewide funding.
And how much?
I don't have those numbers.
They don't know yet.
They don't know. They still have yet to discuss it in the spring.
Okay.
So.
Well, considering tuition is extremely expensive, and we're talking about thousands of students, I think it would be quite an expensive program. And when you talk about something like this, the issue, once again, like you said, nothing is free. Where is this money coming from? You can't just set tuition at a flat rate and expect everything to go the same, especially when these schools are hiring large amounts of administrators on a yearly basis. The spending is out of control at these colleges.
Wait, I'm a little confused. You do not like the flat rate?
No, I think the flat rate's a terrible idea.
Why?
Because the cost of college tuition has to be dynamic. If the cost of maintaining the school is increasing, then students' rates thereby have to increase.
But we're only talking about 4 years.
Yeah, but 4 years is an entire college career.
Well, exactly. So if someone comes in and buys this product, 4 years at Western Connecticut State University, should the price not be the same year 1 through year 4?
I think it should.
It's not a terrible idea. I think you could run, like I said, you can run into some issues when it comes to funding the schools, and then you're going to have to find an alternative source of income. But the fact here is that tuition is far too expensive. That's really the root of this. We can do whatever we want to manipulate those costs, but if you really want to solve the issue, you have to tackle it at the root, which is massive spending at these colleges on, you know, fairly useless positions in a lot of cases.
So you're saying cut the waste.
Administration. Cut a lot of the administration.
Woo! Are you listening, administrators?
Yeah, I really hope they're not. Yeah, I want to stay at this school, please.
We'd like to thank Western Connecticut State University for letting us do this.
Yeah, I'm speaking in general terms, of course.
Look, I know I'm not rich, so
yes,
right?
no.
So look, so we have the flat rate for the 4 years. You don't like it. Jay likes it. What's the second idea?
Well, the second idea is just free tuition for all college students based on a criteria of quality, I guess, based on the student. You know, there's grant programs that we have now. There's, you know, things where you can get a decrease in tuition, but that suggestion is that if the student is good enough and has a quality performance, then the tuition is free.
And good enough would be, they do this, I believe, in some places where you have a B or better average. How do you feel about that?
I think the line could get a little too arbitrary, and I think that line in the first place would have to be very high, because although we could see some schools with outstanding students with this, I think if enough students take advantage of that, the schools are going to be hemorrhaging money.
I think so too. I mean, as a professor, I have had people come up to me and go, "Professor, why did I get such a bad grade?" And it was threatening, and that's how they were trying to get that B. Yeah. However, what do you think about that? Do you think that free tuition is the way to go because it betters society?
No, terrible idea. And the fact is, when you take the value out of any product, it loses. People will not have the same responsibility to that product, right? So when you're just allowing anybody and everybody to go to school, not only could we potentially be dealing with over-enrollment, something like that, but also it devalues the product, right? The school itself. So the other issue is we're talking about trying to make these tuition rates more affordable, which is great. But I think one of the biggest issues in the country right now is that we don't have enough skilled workers to do a lot of blue-collar jobs. I think that needs to be a bigger focus.
So you're saying that a lot of people who are in college right now shouldn't be there?
Some people, absolutely.
And it would be better if they went to a trade school?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I think that we have a huge agenda in this country right now, and it's propagated through a lot of high schools to push people towards college, and it's supposed to be, and it used to be a thing where you could go to college, come out, and get a successful career because you have that valuable degree. But now we've gotten to the point where everybody has degrees, and we're not having enough people in those skilled positions, those skilled trade positions.
But I would say that college is not just to earn you a degree to get a good job, but it's to create a better society. People who are better critical thinkers, no matter if they're a bricklayer, a fireman, a teacher, or president of the United States.
Well, isn't that what high school's supposed to be for? I think what's happened right now is high schools have deferred their responsibility on teaching a lot of those values to colleges.
I don't agree at all, because I've taught the high school level, and I think they're doing a great job in high schools. I think that when people get to your maturation level, early 20s, that they need more education, and it can only make them better. I mean, I love having adult students when they come back. It's a beautiful thing, and you have them in your class.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm saying that the more education a society has, the better that society. So should we not put money into that?
I mean, it really depends on your viewpoint of college. You've got the view that everybody should go to college in an ideal world.
I'm not saying everybody should, but I'm saying it makes for a smarter society.
Right. I guess in contrast, though, you see a system like they have in Germany, where kids go to high school, depending on their performance, they either go to a trade school or they go to a university if they're equipped for it. So currently we have a situation where really anybody can go to colleges, and especially if we make them free, anybody can go to colleges. It's gonna devalue the quality of the education, and there's gonna be people in colleges and universities who don't necessarily need to be there, and it's not necessarily the best thing for them. And I say that once again, there's a huge lack of skilled blue-collar workers in this country: machinists, plumbers, electricians, and people aren't going to the trade schools. People aren't picking up those trades at the moment, and you can make a lot of money doing that stuff right now.
I don't think that's true. And we'd have to look that up to find out. But I would rather have...
Well, there's been a resurgence, absolutely. There's been a resurgence in recent years, but there's still a shortage at the moment.
But I would rather have somebody who's going in to fix the $20,000 plumbing in my house that reads the New York Times than reads the Daily News. Why? Because he can troubleshoot that plumbing and save my house.
Well, I don't think the reading material of a plumber is necessarily the best indicator of his skill at his job.
I'm saying they're interested in bigger issues, and bigger issues help them solve problems.
I don't disagree that it's a bad thing for people to be informed. I think there's also a lot of people who don't necessarily want to be informed on certain subjects, and they work better with their hands in certain situations.
I'm not saying, I am agreeing with you 100% there, but I'm saying that you just don't have a job in life. You go outside your job, you work in your community, you're a citizen, you have children, you work in the kids' school, you're a part of that. And for you to make good decisions there and to contribute to those different factions of the societies in your life is why you should strive for a better education.
Well, I for one think that we need to see in maybe the community colleges some of these programs come up where at maybe even a discounted rate or a forgiven rate, we see all these blue-collar jobs offered as a way to kind of alleviate this, I guess, disenfranchised amount of public that feels like they don't or can't go to college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, interestingly, like I said, there's a huge shortage in this market at the moment, and what's going on right now is many corporations are partnering with high schools to actually provide training to students. And the fact with that is, though, those people who go into those positions aren't necessarily going to be going to college. So I guess my point is, I think it's a beneficial thing. I don't think it's something that's 100% necessary. I don't think it's something that should be you know, told to any and everybody that it's something that they have to do. I think there's people who want to do other things, and we need those people right now more than ever.
Well, I hope they keep going to the library or going to YouTube and increase their own education on their own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's stigmatized, that you know, you need to go to college, and I think that really does need to change. But right now we have Jake from New Milford on the phone. Jake, can you hear us?
Yeah, how are y'all doing today?
We're doing great. So what are you calling in for?
Well, you guys are talking, I'm watching you talking about education, and I'm thinking in today's technology, shouldn't there be a way to give everybody an education? Like if I wanted to go to college, I never went to college, but if I wanted to go, shouldn't there be some way with technology or all that stuff that you guys know to, or funding to get us to all go to college so that everyone can get a college education?
I think that's a fantastic point that you bring up. You know, with all this rampant technology that we're seeing, we really need to implement it in our school systems, you know, secondary and post-secondary.
Oh, and
you would think so. I mean, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you bring up a great point, Jake. Thank you.
Okay, well, you guys are doing a great job, too.
Thank you, and be sure to check us out next week and on election night.
I'll be there.
Good to hear.
Thanks, bye.
Well, you brought up a great point.
That was a fantastic point.
Yeah, because a lot of the courses that we offer here now are online or they're hybrid in-person online.
And you brought up a great point, actually. You kind of hinted to that fact, saying that people can look at YouTube videos and things like that. The internet is one of the biggest things providing people access to a lot of these subjects, and it's not necessarily in a formal way, but it's in a way that they can understand the material. It's free in a lot of cases. And it's a great way to further their education.
And there's enough material out there that it kind of alleviates the whole, I'd say, the book crisis, that, you know, the expensive amount of books that we have to buy. There's students in, you know, in some programs, maybe engineering or nursing, that have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And you know, the everyday student will spend hundreds of dollars on books. And although quality education is worth its weight in money, I do think that technology will, or it does, play a big role in letting that information come to students.
But I've got to go back to the colleges, because in the college, hopefully, the professor and, you know, the administrators create a hunger for knowledge, a hunger for understanding, to understand who's conning you, who's not, you know, etc. We're talking about when you have kids, what's the best decision, right? And the next generation grows. That's where I go back to, it's almost like a mentoring. And that's one of the great things about college.
Absolutely.
I think.
Having someone that you can really relate to and really just go to as almost like a guidance counselor or someone outside of your family that you know and can trust. And I think that's where educators really shine, is where they can really connect with the students.
So can I ask you, what was the third idea?
So the third idea was the forgiveness program, where at the end of your college career, maybe the last year or the last semester, you'll get a rebate. Right.
What do you guys think of that?
Once again, it's just another manipulation of the prices. We're shifting the issue from one place to another. I don't think it solves the problem.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I think it's a good idea. I would like to remind the viewer, if you're just tuning in now, this is Election Connection, WCSU News. We are live tonight until 9 o'clock, and we will be here next week until from 7 to 9 on Tuesday. And then on Election Day, November 6th, we'll be here from 8 to 12. Covering the results of the election. But to get back to your question, I really do believe that a forgiveness program or something really to incentivize the students. Absolutely. I think incentives go a long way. As much harm as an incentive can cause to be the only reason that someone goes to college, I don't think this is really the case.
No, but you put the money in first.
Right, exactly. You
do the work.
You have invested 3 to 3.5 years in your college education, and this is almost a, you know, an attaboy or a good job for doing such a, you know, getting this far.
And you have a start. You have a start. You're not in debt when you start.
Yeah, that's the, you know, what is it? Just behind credit card debt, student debt is student debt is the biggest debt in this country, and it's a multivariate situation, but it's a situation nonetheless we need to deal with.
The forgiveness by itself is not an awful solution. I just think, once again, all of these things we're talking about are distractions from the real issue, which nobody's really talking. I mean, people are talking about it, but it's not being tackled in any meaningful way.
Well, I'm going to have to cut you off right there. Yeah. We have Shannon calling in from Seymour. Shannon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi.
So, what would you like to talk to us about?
I just wanted to make a comment in regards to the college education for everyone.
Sure.
And I just wanted to say, I think college education is important for a lot of people, depending on what they're training to do. But I do feel sometimes people don't have to go to college, depending on what they are doing. I know I mentioned about the plumber. I mean, I know personally a plumber who doesn't have a college education, and he's very, very successful in his field.
Yeah, I mean,
I also know somebody who's also owned his own business and became very successful without a college education. So I just think sometimes it has to be individualized on who should go to college and who really is very good in their field.
Absolutely. We do see successful people that don't have a college education. It's not the defining factor to their success in life. You bring up a great point, Shannon.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing with us.
No problem.
Yeah, so I'd have to agree. You know, there are people, you know, I work for a small business. They've been successful for almost 30 years. Neither of them, well, I believe one of them has a college degree. But, you know, it's not the point I'm trying to make is they don't need it to be successful.
Absolutely. And like I said before, we already put our kids through 12 years of school, and we're saying we can't give them enough in that amount of time. It used to be that people were ready for life and ready for the workforce at the age of 18. Now we've gotten to the point where, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but more people between 18 and 25 are living at their parents' homes than ever.
Well, that's because of the economy.
Yeah, to a certain extent, but I think we also see...
Well, I
I
think there's a couple things that
but
kind of fall into the butt.
I'm saying it's also an attitude shift in young people and in the parents of those young people as well.
But something you can't see right now that I see over and over is the growth and the maturation from a college education. When I get freshmen coming in, these bumbling freshmen, and then by the time they're seniors, my God, look at you two. You're terrific. That didn't happen overnight. Think about it. It happened through your education. It doesn't mean you'll be a better anchorman or you'll be a better reporter, whatever you choose to be. It means you become a better person.
Absolutely. And we're actually going to cut to a break right now. We'll be right back.
Healthcare reform is a key issue.
Welcome back to Election Connection, Western Connecticut State University's live news and election coverage. I'm Jason Ferenzi.
And I'm Jackie Gusta. We're here tonight until 9 p.m. discussing races for the governor's seat, the U.S. Senate seat for Connecticut, the 4th and 5th congressional districts, and state legislative races.
We're also discussing issues important to our community: healthcare, deepfakes, dark money, CT tolls, the U.S. border policy, freedom of speech and of the press, climate politics, and more. I'm David Kuhn.
You can call us at 203-837-9182 and tweet us at ElectionCT.
We've got 6 field teams at various campaign headquarters waiting to give us updates. And we have Ryan Yersha running numbers, but we'll get to him when he's got something for us. But right now, we have Tamia Graham out in the field. Tamia, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing now?
We're doing great in here. So what exactly are you covering? You have Manny Santos, am I correct?
That is correct.
And what exactly are we hearing post-debate and pre-election from Manny?
From Manny, we will be hearing about gun control and mainly the economy as well.
Yeah. And where are you right now, Tamia?
Right now we're in Meriden at City Hall.
Okay. And now you said that his biggest talking points are gun control. What exactly does he have to say about specifically gun control?
Specifically for gun control, he's talking about keeping it from being reformed and mainly having cleaning up the streets for it and putting those putting the guns into the street, taking it off the streets and putting those who are committing those crimes into jail.
All right. Well, thank you, Tamia. Come back to us if you have an update for us.
No problem. Thank you, Jason.
And to me, is going to be out there covering Manny Santos from now until the election. So we'll definitely be hearing what he has to say through her. But definitely gun control, like we heard through the debate, was a big debate, a big debate topic.
And especially between Manny Santos, the Republican, and Jahana Hayes, the Democrat, they are starkly divided on the topic. Manny Santos, huge proponent of the Second Amendment and gun owners in Connecticut. He spoke at CCDL conference, that's Connecticut Concealed Carry Conference, and yeah, very tied into the community. Definitely looking for those votes. It's questionable how many gun owners there are in Connecticut. One thing we do know with gun owners, is they definitely vote. They definitely vote. They will get out and back them. But the question is, how big of a population are they in our state? Yeah. And on the other side, we definitely have strong voices for gun control in Connecticut, especially after Sandy Hook.
Absolutely, and you know, it was interesting to hear Manny Santos say that when the subject of arming the teachers came about in the debate, he wasn't in favor, you know, nationwide for that, but he did say that we should leave it up to the systems of education, the communities that feel that maybe they do need that. And Jahana met that with absolutely not. You know, in this state, in this district, it's a very, very deaf tone thing.
And that's the thing a lot of people miss on the giving guns to teachers argument, I guess if you want to call it that. They miss the fact that it's a voluntary program. It's a voluntary program. So it's already being implemented in certain schools in certain states to, you know, no bad effects, at least so far. And yeah, the idea is for it to be localized, regionalized, and voluntary. We're not forcing teachers. Nobody's proposing forcing teachers to carry guns.
I mean, absolutely, but I really don't think that's the issue of the argument. I think the issue that Jahana feels very passionate about is that there are going to be guns in these schools, and teachers could be disarmed, and you know, students could take advantage of that. You know, they don't have to worry about bringing a gun if they can just, you know, tackle their teacher and take it off them. I think that really, the availability, the easy availability, I think is the biggest issue that she takes with.
There was a teacher that took the armed teacher training, and she said after what she saw in that, she was totally against it. Why? Because she said she saw teachers who were trained, and that's the big issue. Are these people trained or not? So they went through the training, and she said that some of the teachers in this mock setup shot their own students.
Well, there's a lot to talk about with it, but right now we're going to switch over to Ryan, and he's going to show us some numbers.
Thanks, guys. As I mentioned before, Governor Dan Malloy will not seek re-election during this year's midterms. Democrat Ned Lamont and Republican Bob Stephan Auskey are locked in a relatively tight election for the state's highest political office, and it's important to note, neither of them have ever held political office. Both Lamont and Stephan Auskey are, to a certain extent, taking a page from Donald Trump's electoral playbook by using their respective business acumens as the basis for their qualifications for office. Lamont is polling at about 3.5 points ahead of Stephan Auskey, but when we take a look at Connecticut's election history, we have to go all the way back to 1924 to see a non-incumbent candidate for governor of the same political party as the outgoing governor win an election. Look for Stephan Auskey to parlay his recent endorsement by the Independent Party of Connecticut into a few extra votes that will help him close that gap. Moving on to the state Senate, in District 25, incumbent Bob Duff will take on Republican Mark D'Amelio in a race that should be a lock for Duff. Duff has held that seat since 2005, and he's won his last 3 elections by an average of more than 20%. Duff is also Connecticut's Senate Majority Leader, and as someone so senior in Connecticut's Democratic Party, it would be a shock to see him lose this one. In District 34, we'll see Republican incumbent Len Fasano run another less than competitive race against Democrat Eileen McKean. McKean has the overwhelming support of her party in that district. She received 70.8% of votes in the Democratic primary, but we have to consider Fasano's incumbency a huge advantage here. This will be the first time Fasano, who is also the Senate Minority Leader, has faced opposition in a general election since 2012, when he defeated Democrat Steve Fontana by a margin of about 16%. Now, onto the State House. In District 30, we have another mainstay in Connecticut politics, House Speaker and Democratic incumbent Joe Arasimowicz, running it in what may prove to be an interesting election against Republican Stephen Baliszewski. Arasimowicz has held that seat since 2005, but he only won re-election over Republican Christopher Morelli by about 3.5% in 2016. We'll definitely be keeping an eye on this one. and District 114 Republican incumbent and House Minority Leader Themis Klarides should be a lock to win her election against Democrat Mary Waitlander. Klarides has held that seat since 1999 and has defeated the same candidate, Democrat Alden Hines, in her last 3 elections by at least 27% and by as much as 70% in 2016. Stick around and we'll go over the rest of the races we're covering here at WCSU's Election Connection later in the show. Back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks, Ryan. You know, I think it's interesting that we're seeing a lot of incumbents this election, and as well as we're seeing almost the exact opposite, people that aren't a part of politics. Our gubernatorial race, you know, we're seeing the Democratic and the Republican, no real connection to politics until now. And I just find it personally interesting that we're seeing this sort of wave that I think President Trump paved the way for, that you don't need to be a career politician, you don't even need to be a politician to really kind of sway favor.
But you have to be able to do the job, correct?
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't think this is a totally new thing. We're talking about Mike Bloomberg, who's a self-made millionaire. And when he became mayor of New York, he didn't even move into Gracie Mansion. He had his own 3-story townhouse somewhere on the east side, and he ran the city from there. But on the other side, we have newcomer Ocasio-Cortez, who is going to be my new congresswoman, who I would not vote for. Because she doesn't know how to do the job. When she has been interviewed, I've been extremely disappointed. She doesn't have a handle on some of the issues and throws her hands up and says, well, I don't know how we're going to pay for it.
Well, it's definitely an interesting thing to hear about the New York side of this election. But right now we have Jason Cementilli in Newtown. Jason, do you have any updates for us right now?
As of right now, there isn't any updates. However, from before, I'd like to bring up again about Matt Corey's immigration policy, where Matt Corey believes that we should stop the flow of illegal immigrants while speeding up and streamlining the review of applicants who want to come to this country legally.
And do you think his opposition has, I guess, a very drastic point of view for that?
I feel like his opponent, Senator Chris Murphy, has an opposing view. He wants to tighten border security while providing a fair path to citizenship.
Do you think that there's any way that they might change it immediately if either of them are brought into the Senate?
As of right now, it's hard to tell. Being that Senator Murphy has been in the seat before, it's hard to tell from the point of view. It's up to the voters to decide who they want to be in office on election night on Tuesday, November 6th.
Yeah, and you're going to be there for us covering both of those candidates on 6th. So thank you very much, Jason.
Thank
you. Again, immigration is just such a big talking point among every race. I mean,
yeah, and to the point you were making before, Chris Murphy is one of those incumbents. You know what I mean? He's one of those people who's been around and who's going to stick around. I don't think Matt Corey has a huge chance in this one, just looking at the poll numbers, being realistic. But Chris Murphy has a serious history in the state. He's now really projecting himself on the national level, and he's got the popularity, he's got the name recognition. Matthew Corey is not as fortunate in that case.
No, and where exactly is Corey coming from?
What is his image of an immigrant? What is Matthew Corey's image? What do you think of when you hear him say that?
Well, as we were just hearing in that report right there, his plan, excuse me,
Not
is
his
to...
plan, but what is his image of an immigrant?
You'd have to ask him that.
No, well, you know. Immigrants are people who do what in this state? They come in and take our resources from the taxpayer, correct?
I don't know. I'm an immigrant. I'm a taxpayer, so I feel like I'm not doing that.
We are all, I would say, sitting at this table at least 2 degrees separated from somebody coming over to this country.
Well, my father came over at a young age.
Okay, right, and you too. And my grandparents. Most people are immigrants in this country. Most of the immigration happens not because people are coming over borders, but because people overstay their visas.
Yeah, absolutely. That doesn't make it any less legitimate, in my opinion, though.
No, but I'm saying it's not that we have to build walls to keep them out, like Matthew Corey is saying, or damn these people, and all these things against them. They're not addressing the issue that is the true problem.
Which is what, in your opinion?
Overstaying visas.
Yeah, well, overstaying visas.
Immigration numbers are down.
Well, it's neutral at this point. It had a dip, and actually there's been a slight rise in recent months. But the fact is, even though overstaying visas is a massive problem, people coming over the border is almost a bigger problem.
Because?
If not just by numbers, but the issue is people coming in on visas, or at least being checked, they're being given those visas by the U.S. State Department. So at least there's a degree of verification for those people entering the country. Whereas people coming over the border, there is absolutely no way of knowing who these people are. So it's a massive security risk, in my opinion.
Because they're all criminals that are coming over, or what?
Well, you have no way of knowing.
Like Trump's saying. So you assume that they are.
I'm saying there could be some in the mix, and there's no way to tell.
I'm sure there could be criminals in the studio right now. There could be some in the mix, and there's no way to tell. Look, when people come over, the people that are coming over that will take the southern border.
Sure.
Because Matthew Corey is worried about them coming up to Connecticut, right? God knows they're taking away our jobs, picking strawberries and cleaning houses and all that. I want those jobs, and don't you when you get your college education. Those immigrants, number one, are actually adding to the economy of the state of Connecticut. That's one point. The other point is that the people that are coming over that southern border, in general now, are fleeing the terrible conditions. They're refugees.
They're seeking asylum.
They're seeking asylum.
So the question is, though, and I think you bring up a great point, they're obviously coming here and they're getting work because there is a demand for their labor.
And it's good for business.
But the fact is, when it comes down to this issue specifically, a lot of Americans look at it and say, if we're not going to treat these people who broke a law by coming into this country illegally in the same regard as anybody else who would break a law.
Did you break a law today? I bet you did. And I bet you I did, and I bet you Jason did.
Yeah, but
I won't speak to that.
I don't think most of us go out on a daily basis attempting to break any laws. The fact is, somebody immigrating to this country illegally is doing that.
So we slap a label on them and say they're illegal.
Yes, because they broke a law.
They broke a law. I went through a red light today. Should you deport me out of the country?
Well, that's a whole different scale.
No, it's not.
It absolutely is.
No, it's not. Those people coming over here are fleeing their countries.
So let me ask you about this. Those people are able to make it to this country fleeing conflicts because they are geographically situated in that it's a possibility for them to cross the border. What about the people in other parts of the country? Do we have to take everyone from all over the world who's in a dire situation?
I'm not saying that.
So then why are we only taking people from South America? Why don't we take everybody?
We're not taking people. We take people from different countries. The point is that right now, the people who are being vilified are the people that are coming over the southern border, who are trying to escape their violent countries. I had Sonia Nazario. She's a Pulitzer Prize winner. She writes for the LA Times, and she took the death train from Guatemala with a young man, 12 years old, up through Central America. And what she told me was astounding, that these kids used to come to be with their mothers who they couldn't find work in their countries. They'd leave their kids behind. How heartbreaking is that? But now the countries in Central America are so violent because of the gangs, and you have kids, you have young men half your age who are told
able to jump across the border into America.
Now wait, we haven't gotten that. Listen, let me finish. That when they're down in their country, the gang members come and say, you join our gang, we're going to kill you, we're going to cut your mother's heart out, etc. The girls are said, yeah, you're going to be my girlfriend or I'm going to kill your sister. It's that kind of situation, which was created by the United States. Those gangs started here, and then they were deported because they were criminals up here, and they went down to Central America. So they are fleeing those horrible conditions. And that's the history of our country, that we take in the oppressed.
But the difference is the scale of immigration at this point since the 1965 Immigration Act has been immense. We are not able to absorb...
It's not worse than when my grandparents came in at the turn of the century.
The rate of immigration at this point is, at least in the last 60, 50 years, has been higher than any other point in the country's history.
What's your source for that? We're going
U.S.
to have
national
to look
census
that
data.
up.
But anyway, the fact is, we're not able, due to the scale of immigration at this current moment, we're not able to assimilate people into this country because they're arriving and they're going into their enclosed communities and not necessarily interacting with the rest of the population. But I think you bring up a great point saying that there is immense violence occurring right now in South America. And like I said before, there is no way of verifying whether people who are coming across the border are people fleeing conflict or are the exact same gang members you're talking about.
You know, that was that crazy argument that they made when we had a boatload of Jewish people coming over from Nazi Germany. It was the St. Louis, and they were refused entry into the United States. They were sent back and they were exterminated in their country. Anne Frank's family was exterminated because they were not allowed to immigrate over here. It's the same situation and it's your same argument.
Well, I'm going to cut from you guys
I don't know.
right
I
now.
think there's
It's a very
some
lively
differences,
debate,
but yeah.
there's definitely differences. But we have Stephanie Shaw right now, I believe, in Norwalk. Stephanie, can you hear me? Stephanie, are you there? I don't think I can hear you over here.
Yes, this is Stephanie Shaw live in Norwalk, Connecticut at the Norwalk Inn and Conference Center, where in 2 weeks, Democratic candidate Bob Duff will be awaiting the results of election night, where he's running for re-election as the Democratic Senate Majority Leader representing Norwalk, Connecticut and Darien, Connecticut.
What exactly are we hearing from Bob Duff right now in terms of what he wants for Connecticut?
He is really passionate about job creation and a stronger, better economy for Connecticut.
And has he kind of went into detail as to how he seeks to reach those ends?
Yes, he supports the idea of tuition-free community college, where students will get a degree and hopefully get a better paying job that will lead to more investments and a stronger economy for Connecticut.
That's great, Stephanie, and you're going to be out there for us next week and the week after for the debate.
Yes.
That's good to hear. We're going to bring it back to the studio. Thank you very much, Stephanie.
Thank you. This is Stephanie Shaw, WCSU News, Election Connection.
Kind of to bring it back from immigration to education, you know, that was something I wanted to bring up, but I didn't. The free education on a community college level. I went to community college myself, so I understand the value. You know, I saw such a diverse crowd of people. I saw people my age fresh out of college. Yeah. I saw people go for job retraining. You know, they can't keep the job that they have without a higher level of education. I saw people who grew up in agricultural families who really want maybe something else than the life that they grew up in. So I think that the Connecticut community colleges really, and perhaps community colleges nationwide, need to be more focused and be the focal point of education reform. And even Johanna Hayes went to Naugatuck Valley Community College, so I shared that alumnus with her.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point. The community colleges are a severely underutilized resource in our state and across the country, and I think they could definitely do with more focus. The question is there a demand for people to go there? Maybe they need more advertising, but I think it's definitely something that needs to be addressed.
But do you think it should be a free community college education? It is drastically cheaper than regular college.
I think at the moment, community college is very affordable, and that's excellent. I think, once again, moving to a system where it's completely free, I'll say the same thing again, it devalues the quality of the education, and already community colleges are highly subsidized by the state. But I think if we go to the point where they're getting absolutely no revenue from tuition or class fees, you know, they're gonna run into that same issue that they're gonna have to find that revenue somewhere else.
Well, we'll get back to this discussion, but right now we're going to take a look at the weather with our weatherman, Paul Taschereau.
Good evening once again. We're talking about cool and dry weather over the next few days. A cold front will be moving through tonight, and it's also going to bring in some gusty winds for Wednesday and Thursday. But the biggest news is the potential for a storm later on this weekend, and we will talk about that in just a second. Let's go over to the next graphic on the surface map. To our west, we have a cold front. This is the cold front moving through. This sparked off some showers and thunderstorms today. But back across the central country, we have high pressure. That's going to come into our area over the next few days. Now let's talk about this weekend storm. This is a very complex setup. There's a few scenarios we are tracking. One is a track well off to our south and east. A track like this would usher in much colder air that is located across southeastern Canada. If this were to verify, we would have to watch for the possibility of some snow. Not saying that's likely right now, but that is one solution on the table. Let's go over to the next graphic. The next scenario is a track that is much closer to the coast. When we see a track like that, that brings in milder air from the south, and we would be talking about rain. So be sure to keep an eye on the weather over the next few days. And let's bring it back to Danbury. For tonight's forecast, skies will become partly cloudy. It'll be around 40 degrees, seasonable for this time of year. And let's bring it over to tomorrow's forecast. We'll see a high of 52, partly cloudy, winds gusting upwards of 25 miles per hour at times. Let's get over to the tomorrow night forecast, clear and cold, lows in the upper 20s. And let's take it over to the 5-day forecast to finish this off. For Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, highs up around 50 again, breezy Wednesday and Thursday of the weekend. This is what we are watching. These high temperatures are going to be highly dependent on where the storm tracks. It might be colder if we see this track south and east, warmer if it goes to our west. So be sure to follow all the latest as the week progresses. And let's take it back over to the desk.
Thanks, Paul. We're really definitely seeing some very interesting weather right now. Connecticut, and I think nationally, and I think globally. So I think the way that maybe the politicians view climate change and maybe climate legislation, I think the voters are really looking for that in this election.
I would disagree. I think climate change or, environmental policy is probably at the lowest point of popularity it's ever been at the moment. Well, I wouldn't especially in Connecticut. No, but I guess you could make the argument. Recently, the United Nations just came out with a report basically encouraging countries to take a more environmentally friendly stance. Obviously, Trump pulled out of the Paris agreements. And there's things to talk about, but I don't think that's the focus of most American voters and most Connecticut voters at the moment. When we've got such massive problems in our state, at least with the economy, people are definitely,
maybe.
Yeah, healthcare.
I think healthcare is really an important.
But no, I mean people are talking about environmental policy, and what we're seeing right now is the U.S. at the moment has stopped letting themselves be dictated what to do by the UN and by these transnational agreements, and we're not beholden to those same powers anymore, and it's allowing us to be a little freer. We're seeing a huge resurgence in energy right now. The U.S. is making huge strides in producing energy, natural gas, fracking, which a lot of people aren't too happy about, but it's definitely producing something.
Well, while you might be right that it might not be the most talked about subject in this debate, I definitely think Medicare or Medicare for All is one of the biggest things, and I really think we should take a look at, should Medicare be something for everyone?
Healthcare reform is a key issue many candidates are expected to address every election cycle. One possible solution to the health coverage crisis in America is universal health care, or Medicare for All. It's an idea that's steadily growing in popularity while remaining an extremely divisive one in today's political climate. The United States spends more on health care than any other country in the world. Most of that spending comes from the private sector, instead of federally funded aid programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, and the Veterans Affairs. While 52% of Americans are covered by their employer, the 2017 U.S. Census reports that 28 million Americans do not have health coverage. In 2016, presidential primary candidate Bernie Sanders inspired progressives around the country to pledge their support for his platform of Medicare for All. Medicare is a federal program funded largely by tax revenue for Americans 65 or older. Medicare for All would offer coverage for all kinds of medical necessities for any citizen under one system. Using tax money would create a single-payer system, which is used by Canada and most European countries. However, many Democrats in Congress have their disagreements about Medicare for All, choosing instead to protect the Affordable Care Act from being replaced by the Republicans' American Health Care Act.
This bill, the American Health Care Act, it keeps our promise to repeal and replace Obamacare.
The first attempted repeal failed in March of 2017. Many people support a single-payer system because they believe the nature of private health institutions is predatory and unfair by design. We spoke to Connecticut State Senate candidate Julie Kushner to explore the idea.
Pharmaceutical benefits are usually very expensive, and even our elderly, pay too much for prescription drugs. And that's an area where I think we really need to focus and concentrate to see that we are paying attention to what can we do as a state to make improvements even where the federal government has not.
The Democratic Socialists of America is one group that routinely campaigns for Medicare for all.
Wages would rise, and we'd be far more competitive with the rest of the world if employers weren't saddled with paying for their employees' health insurance.
George Macon University's Mercatus Center reported in July that a Sanders-style Medicare for all would increase government spending to nearly $33 trillion within 10 years.
The simplest principle in economics is Tonstoffel. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch.
Many Republican voters, like Austin Samuelson, are concerned the strain on taxpayers will be too significant to even consider Medicare for all a possibility.
If somebody is ill, they have the right to seek health care, but they do not have the right to go and receive free health care. Truly, nothing is free. The cost for that health care is being taken out in your taxes, and there's always a hidden cost somewhere.
A poll published in August by French company Ipsos and Reuters revealed 52% of Republican voters polled support Medicare for all. Why the change?
I'm shocked. My initial reaction to seeing that poll, I was shocked because it goes against all the basic premises of being a Republican in holding conservative fiscal values.
The popularity of Medicare for all is probably not about a leader, about a single person, but just the average patient, the average voters, the average American's crisis.
Both sides of the political spectrum seem to agree that something is wrong with healthcare in America, but it's clear that several factors keep a consensus out of reach. This year's midterm elections may or may not change that. For WCSU News Election Connection, I'm Joseph Oliveira.
We've had several calls tonight, but if you don't feel like calling us here at Election Connection, you can actually tweet us at ElectionCT. That's ElectionCT on Twitter, and we'll gladly answer anything, any question you ask, or address any comment you leave us. On the subject of Medicare for all, that's the biggest argument you hear. It's expensive. It's going to cost the taxpayer. It's going to cost every American.
Well, this is the thing. This election cycle, healthcare is the single biggest issue on the table. And what we saw is that...
On both sides?
On both sides. On both. I mean, for voters, at least, it is the single biggest issue. And for Democrats in particular, it's been one of the biggest focuses of their advertising. So it's massive. Everybody's talking about it. But I think what happened really is that the Republicans failed with the American Health Care Act in Congress. I think we all remember John McCain giving the nice thumbs down on that and really crushing the whole thing. And what happened is the Republicans had somewhat of a plan of how to go about solving the healthcare crisis we have in this country. Healthcare costs are extremely expensive. Health insurance is extremely expensive. So they had a plan, they failed, and now I think what a lot of people are doing is not really giving too much credence to that opinion anymore, and they're looking at Medicare for all as the only solution on the table now, which I don't agree with, but I think that's definitely the trend.
What do you think we should do?
Well, I think once again, when it comes to all these things, tuition, healthcare, you've got these people proposing, let's just make it free. My question is, where is the money coming from?
No, we understand that, and $33 billion is trillion. I'm sorry.
And this is the fact.
Over 10 years.
What's going to happen with these situations? You have serious issues, serious integral and institutional issues with tuition, or with higher education and with healthcare. And by simply making it free, you're not solving those integral institutional issues.
Let me make a distinction here. You don't have to go to college, but if you have a heart attack, you're going to go to the hospital, whether you have insurance or not.
So do you think that maybe privatization of healthcare is, more important?
Yeah, well, we have a private healthcare system at the moment. It is broken thanks to the fact that there is so much government intervention in the system that it's completely manipulated the prices. We've also got issues with monopolies in the system for sure. But the fact is, the other major issue we have is that it's not very easy to trade health insurance across state lines, which is becoming easier as time's going on. Trump just signed a bill referring to that specific issue 2 weeks ago. So that's being addressed. But the fact is those root issues in the healthcare system are not being solved, and I think that's what really needs to get tackled.
And what are those root issues?
The root issues are that the prices are exorbitant. Prices for any medical procedure you go for are insane.
Right.
We also talk about prescription drug prices are through the roof. So these things are not actually, I wouldn't say that they are products of a free market system. I think they're products of manipulations in the marketplace.
Okay.
And what we need is more competition.
More competition is just going to bring more of the problem that you're talking about.
I would disagree. Because when you have more companies coming in, creating innovation, they're going to be trying to undercut each other on prices of drugs and whatever else, and hopefully maintain the same quality because their reputations are on the line.
So why haven't we seen prices go down in the United States? I mean, in this country, we pay more for health care, and we have the worst health care.
We actually have some of the best health care in the world.
Well, we have best health care, but in general, compared to other countries and socialist countries, our health care is not as good as theirs. If I want to get something fixed in this country, it's going to cost me $1 billion, right? Well, if I go to another country, they're going to take care of me.
Yeah, so I would disagree saying that our health care is not the best. I think we have possibly the best health care in the world. Most people from foreign countries, if they have cancer, if they need serious surgeries, if they can afford it, they're coming to America to get that stuff done. So
I haven't seen much of a mass migration coming from Canada.
It definitely happens. I mean, we can't talk about anecdotes, you know, here and use that to prove our points, but the fact is America has an incredible healthcare system. The issue is the prices, though. The prices are exorbitant because we have massive collusion between health insurance companies and healthcare providers. And the other issue we have is that most people are deriving their insurance through their employers.
Right.
They're not buying it themselves. So Obamacare had a great idea in allowing people to purchase insurance as individuals. It just didn't work at all. People didn't like the system, and it came with too many burdens.
Well, it was based on Romneycare out of Massachusetts, which makes Obamacare a Republican concept, which it is.
Well, I mean, I don't think you can say one Republican supported this idea, therefore it's a Republican idea.
No, I'm not saying one Republican, but the person who was the architect of Romneycare also was the architect for Obamacare. And when pressed on that issue, he said, look, it's the same effing program. So that's how you're saying it.
But the national platform for Republicans across the country is in opposition to Obamacare, always has been.
But that's a political statement. That is ignoring that basically they're the same program. So let's move on from that.
Well, I'm actually going to cut you off right now from that one. We have Joseph Oliveira reporting from Hartford on the phone. Joseph, can you hear us?
Jason, good to speak with you.
Awesome. It's great to hear you, Joseph. So what exactly are you going to be covering this week, next week, and the night of the election?
Well, next week as well as Tuesday night, we'll be reporting live from the campaign headquarters of Bob Stephan Auskey, GOP candidate for governor of Connecticut, Ned Lamont for the Democratic Party, and Oz Griebel running on an independent campaign, again, however, not officially endorsed by the Independent Party of Connecticut.
And now, we heard tonight from Monty Frank, the lieutenant governor of Oz Griebel, that they're polling at relatively low numbers. Do you think that there's anything that they can do to up those numbers, or do you think it's really just a red versus blue, excuse me?
You know, David, they're going to have to address things that are on Connecticut voters' minds. One of the reasons why there's a lot of concentrated attention on the Republican and Democratic candidates is because they're talking about issues that are pertinent to voters and the working class.
So we're not hearing
the Oz Griebel campaign is certainly addressing issues like that. However, the problem of their endorsement and the problem of the popularity being shared by the other two candidates unfortunately has proven to be one of the pitfalls for their popularity. However, you do point out, yes, Monty Frank is certainly right that it has grown substantially from 11 from the October number to 50% of this month, which is the most recent polling.
Yeah, you know, maybe they'll find those numbers, maybe they won't. You know, it's definitely an uphill battle for them as well as a couple other candidates in this state. So, Joseph, I want to thank you for your time tonight.
Good to hear from you. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, we've got Joseph covering the gubernatorial election. You know, we heard from Monty Frank earlier, the lieutenant governor for the independent seat. But, you know, let's get back to, I'd like to switch subjects on Medicare for All. Do you think that the, excuse me, I lost it, the retirement age has anything to do at all with our current crisis with Medicare?
Well, demographics have a huge amount to do with our current crisis right now. The fact that Social Security has not been funded for who knows how many years because of the fact that we have an aging population and it's not being replaced at the moment. So, you know, that's something that's incredibly hard to solve. I guess maybe have more babies. I don't know. But the other thing is, with Social Security specifically, that money's people have the idea that they're paying into a system that's going to then pay them back at the end of it, but that's really not the case. They're paying this money that goes into
the generation now that's receiving from it.
Yeah, but the fact is, it's not. The government has all this money, and are they really spending it on that? I don't know if that's necessarily the case. We've seen a lot of cases where Social Security money has been used for other things, and interestingly, recently there was a proposal made by a conservative women's group to use Social Security money for maternity leave. So just another instance of kind of appropriating that money to something that wasn't its initial intention.
Well, I mean, we're able to discuss all these issues right now, and all of us are literate. But how do we think about the literacy, civics-wise, in this country of the voter and just of the average citizen? And we have that story right now.
Can you pass the U.S. citizenship test?
Maybe. Yes, I do believe so.
I very much hope so. I guess we're gonna find out.
Test.
Nope.
Nope.
Not at all.
The U.S. citizenship test is composed of 100 questions across 5 categories: American government, systems of government, rights and responsibilities, American history, and integrated civics. 10 questions from the 100 are chosen randomly for the test takers. To pass, one must get at least 6 right. What is the name of the Speaker of the House of Representatives?
No clue.
Paul Ryan.
Paul Ryan.
Yes, that's correct. Which state was not one of the original 13? Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, or Rhode Island?
Vermont.
Vermont, good job.
Vermont.
Yes.
Vermont.
Yes, that's correct. A Newsweek survey from 2011 found that 70% of Americans didn't even know that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. A 2016 survey by the Annenberg Public Policy Center of the University of Pennsylvania found that only 26% of respondents could name all 3 branches of the government. Do you think students should be required to take the U.S. citizenship test?
Yeah, I think they should know enough that someone who wants to come in the country would know. Why not?
No, not really,
Why
no.
do you think so?
Because, I mean, you're already living here, and some of these things are straight giveaways, so, like, you either know it or you don't.
I definitely think people should be required from a very young age to know this information just because it's a part of our history. And I think if we're requiring other people to know this to get in our country, then the people who live here should be held even more accountable for knowing this information because I think it's important.
I think that would be a good idea. That would probably be a great idea, and it ensures that students leaving their senior year of high school actually know about the country that they're in. That's a wonderful idea, actually.
Washington Examiner said in 2015, Arizona became the first state to require high school students to pass a civics test with questions drawn from the U.S. citizenship test to graduate, according to the Education Commission of the state. Groups such as the Joe Foss Institute, a nonprofit organization focused on public service, advocate for requiring students to pass a civics test as a condition of graduation, with the idea that teachers will need to teach the information on the test. In recent years, at least 16 states, from Missouri to Louisiana to Minnesota, have passed laws requiring students to take a civics test before receiving their diplomas. Whether or not people agree that civics is a vital part of education, Thomas Jefferson once said, "An educated citizenry is a vital requisite for our survival as a free people." I'm Samantha Salborn with WCSU News, Election Connection.
You know, as amusing as it might be to see people fumble with these what seem like really easy questions, maybe to people like us, you know, who's the Speaker of the House, all of that, it really is important, civic literacy in my opinion. And I think high schools should really be upheld, because I think that's the age where people really, maybe even in college, where it's required that you need to take a civics course to receive your education and for the betterment of society.
And that's exactly what I was saying earlier. I think high schools and elementary schools right now are lacking in teaching students these vital skills, these vital elements of citizenship, I would say. And we can see that there's record low numbers of voters turning out in most elections, which just goes to show that they don't understand the importance of voting. They could also be disillusioned. They could fully well know that it's important, but just choose not to. But I think for the most part, people don't have enough information on how our country is run and what it takes and what they should know about it and the effect it has on them.
Well, I don't think it's what they're teaching or not teaching. I remember learning all those things in elementary school. However, there's all kinds of elements as to why people don't feel connected to this country. You know who voted Donald Trump in as president were the non-voters, because more people did not vote than the people who did. And that cracks up, that ruins our democracy. You don't have a voice from each person. I think it's not how much knowledge they have, but how connected they feel, or if they think that they matter.
I don't know, I still feel like it's, you know, and you were right with the, you know, we're seeing projected low numbers. I think roughly around 49 or 50% of projected voters in Connecticut for some of these races. I think people just need to retain the information better, and I think just getting it to them more in our school systems will help them. And you said that you remember from elementary school. It might just be me. I don't remember really. I mean, I can't tell you who the 35th president was. I can't tell you who, well, that might be an anecdotal one, but.
There's no requirement to know this information.
Right. I think that's the biggest issue.
I don't think we have a country at the moment that has a huge degree of, that places a huge degree of importance on civics and knowledge about government and politics to a certain extent. So I think it's an interesting point you bring up, though, saying the people who elected Donald Trump are the non-voters. I think there was a lot of people who came out who hadn't necessarily voted before. But, you know, when you look at numbers like that, I think you have a lot of the same people voting in presidential elections year after year. He did manage to draw a lot of people into the fold, though. A lot of people who felt they were not represented by the current system.
Of course, that was he had the power of that on his side.
Yeah, he really targeted the disenfranchised of the previous system.
They thought they were heard for the first time.
And I think that's actually something, is that when we talk about a lot of these things, like us talking right now, there's a lot of prior knowledge that's necessary. And what Donald Trump does is he makes all these topics accessible to people who don't necessarily have all that background knowledge. So it makes things more appealing to somebody who doesn't watch the news every day or read the newspaper every day. And I think that's really what one of the big draws for him is.
All right, I will give you that he talks in their language, but their language is undereducated, and it's crude, and it's cruel.
You're saying his language or the language of millions of Americans?
I'm saying his language. He uses that language. Yeah. And I will say cruel, and I will give you example after example. We don't have time. But getting in front of a rally and putting down Christine Blasey Ford, that her testimony, and she, this, that, and everybody in the background, his supporters, getting off on it and cheering and clapping. Yeah, if that is what those people need, is to rise above people who are suffering, to feel more important than a Christine Blasey Ford, to feel more.
I don't think that's the way they see it, but
I can see it there. I can see it. I don't want to see it, but I do, and I think that's how he gets supporters for his immigration stance, that I'm up here, you're down here, get out of my country. I think he does it with women. We've seen him do it with women. If you remember the Republican debates, how he treated the only woman up there and said, look at that face, would you want to look at that? That was cruel. I think there is an element to his attraction, and I wish there wasn't.
Well, let's cut away from this right now because we have Ryan Yersha standing by with some stats for us on the upcoming race. So why don't you give us a quick recap?
Thanks, Jay. Before we get into the races for the United States House and Senate, let's take a closer look at those toss-up elections for the state offices I mentioned earlier in the show. So incumbent George C. Jepsen will not seek re-election for Attorney General during this year's midterms, giving Republicans a chance to take control of the office for the first time in over 20 years. Democrat William Tong, who has served in the state House as a representative of District 147 since 2009, will take on Republican Susan Hatfield, who became a state prosecutor with the Connecticut Division of Criminal Justice in 2005 and served as a delegate to the 2016 Republican National Convention. Tong emphasizes his record in the state's legislature and his opposition to the Trump administration's immigration policies, while Hatfield highlights her career as a prosecutor rather than a professional politician, tying Tong to Governor Dan Malloy and his concern with national politics over issues within Connecticut. It should be especially interesting to see how these messages play with their respective bases over the next few weeks. Following the departure of Denise Napier, who was first elected to the office of Treasurer in 1998, Republicans will also look to take control of that seat for the first time in 2 decades. The Democratic candidate for Treasurer, Sean Wooden, ran an unsuccessful bid for the state Senate in 2014 in his only other campaign for political office. His opponent, Republican Thad Gray, has not run for office before, but he does have a number of executive and investment committee memberships on his professional and public service records. Moving on to the United States House, Connecticut's 4th congressional district will see longtime Democratic incumbent Jim Himes take on Republican Harry Arora. Himes narrowly won this seat for the first time in 2008 and has since seen an average margin of victory of around 12%. His most recent victory came by a margin of about 19%, so Arora will need to inspire a huge Republican turnout in that district to pull out a win. Democratic incumbent Elizabeth Essie will not seek re-election as the representative of Connecticut's 5th congressional district in the United States House, giving Republicans a clear opportunity to take a seat back from the Democrats. Democrat Johanna Hayes, the 2016 National Teacher of the Year, has the clear advantage in funding over Republican Manny Santos, former mayor of Meriden. She has raised around $1.3 million to Santos' $52,000. Lastly, we'll be covering the election for one of Connecticut's 2 representatives in the United States Senate. Democratic incumbent Chris Murphy, who has held that seat since his election in 2012, will take on Republican Matthew Corey. Murphy won his election to this seat by a margin of 11.7% after representing Connecticut's 5th congressional district beginning in 2007. Corey, on the other hand, unsuccessfully sought election to represent Connecticut's 1st congressional district in 2012, 2014, and 2016. We'll be keeping an eye on all of these races over the next few weeks and giving you updates on polling and vote counts as we approach Election Day. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Ryan. Right now we're going to take a quick look about the homelessness crisis that we're kind of seeing. And so I guess before we kind of show, what do you think about, what do you think is really causing the homeless crisis in Connecticut? Once again, the economy. The economy. I mean, Connecticut is doing so poorly right now, and this is just another symptom of that fact. And it's terrible. It's terrible what we see right now. There's not enough beds for these homeless people. A lot of them end up in jails and other institutions, and somehow it needs to get tackled. And I think the best way is to get the economy moving again. Well, I mean, for some people, it is really worse. So let's take a look at how the situation unfolds in Hartford, Connecticut.
According to the U.S. Census, persons in poverty in the United States is at 12.7%. In Hartford alone, 31.2% of people are below the poverty line. Comparatively, over a quarter of the people in Hartford are below the poverty line. Hartford has the highest food stamp rate in the entire state of Connecticut at over 40%. The average income is only about $20,000 a year. Almost 1 in 10 people in Connecticut that obtain food stamps come from Hartford.
So we set out to Hartford in order to ask why and how has this poverty gap increased. We interviewed an individual named Angel who is currently homeless in order to find some answers. We didn't know what to expect. He originally had an apartment up in Manchester where he worked for arguably one of the best restaurants in the city, the Main Pub. He worked there for 9 years until his father in Puerto Rico was diagnosed with cancer. The night that Angel received his second update about the cancer, his father had passed away. After flying back down from Puerto Rico, not even a week after his father's death, his mother passed away from a heart attack. Not long after that, his apartment in Manchester had burned down as well. In 1 week, he lost both of his parents and nearly everything he had ever owned.
My apartment in Manchester burns down. I lose everything.
Unfortunately, he resorted to heroin to deal with the pain because he felt so alone.
I I know there's no excuse to go back out there and use drugs or whatever, but I was just so depressed and I didn't know what to do with myself.
He also expressed how it was very difficult for people who were in his situation to get help without jumping through hoops. After all, he lost his birth certificate and ID after his apartment caught on fire.
And we are dying out here. That's a fact. What we need, if you could help, is access to programs where we could go and get better without jumping through all these hoops.
After speaking to Angel, we decided to do some investigating. Some agencies were eager to help.
Thank you for calling any care. Can you show talk? Can I help you? Good morning, South Park.
While surprisingly, some phone calls and web searches led us to dead ends.
Please hang up and dial 211.
We got a hold of local expert Robin Oliveira, a program manager of the judicial branch in Hartford, to help answer a few questions.
After that big bubble burst in the 90s and people who were once middle class and making decent money, they were downsized or companies moved out of the state, they lost their jobs. So when you hit like 40, 45, and 50, you don't seem to be as attractive to an employer anymore. And that impacts people's ability to still eat, keep a roof over their heads, take care of their kids.
We also briefly asked her about Angel's situation.
The Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services has hospitals across the state. And Angel's situation, he would be eligible for Husky, which is the insurance plan, because he does not have any income. He is a homeless individual. Although his situation sounds dire, he would be a better candidate for getting resources quickly as opposed to you.
According to the Department of Labor, Connecticut's unemployment rate improved slightly in June, dropping from 4.5 to 4.4% as the state gained over 6,000 jobs. Job growth for the calendar year now stands at almost 15,000 jobs, up just under 1% from 2017. Construction and manufacturing are now the fastest growing sectors. According to ctmirror.org, Connecticut has now recovered just under 88% of the jobs lost in the 2008 recession. About 105,000 jobs have returned to Connecticut since its original loss of over 119,000. With this year's election, the people of Hartford and many people like Angel are left waiting for a much-needed change.
I mean, that's just a harrowing story, and it's harrowing because it's true. I mean, it's just, these are people, these are lives that we're seeing suffer in our own state, in our own towns. And, you know, I mean, I know both candidates on each side of the debate, specifically John Hayes and Manny Santos, they address that, yes, this is an issue, and we need to take care of it. But again, there's different ways that they feel that they can take care of it. But I think the most important thing is that they really need to keep on that promise. I think that's one of the, I mean, it just pulls at the heartstrings, just seeing Angel's story there.
The fact, yeah, I think one way or another, we need to do something about the addiction crisis in this state and throughout the country. But while we're talking about Connecticut, we see huge rates of addiction, people using opiates, people dying from fentanyl overdoses. So this is a huge problem for the state. So access to services is definitely helpful in solving this issue, in getting people the treatment they need. But at the same time, addiction is such a tough subject because you can do as much as you want for a person, but unless they want to get into recovery, there's only so much you can do.
Why is there such a high addiction rate now?
I think it definitely is related to the downturn in 2008 and, you know, kind of bad economic situation in general. But at the same time, we've also seen an influx of a lot of these drugs into the streets. So it seems like the availability is just higher. And the other thing, of course, is the opioid pill crisis that we had as well. So people were being overprescribed opiates to a huge degree, and then when they couldn't access those pills anymore, they turned to street drugs in order to get their fix, unfortunately.
But what's the basis of that? Why would you choose to take those drugs?
Well, the fact is there's actually investigations going on at the moment, And Manny Santos pointed this out in his debate the other day. He said that the FDA has stopped their investigation into some of these pharmaceutical companies that were pushing these drugs on doctors to prescribe at high rates. And yeah, that's definitely something that was going on for sure. So they were being forced to prescribe, and then people were taking them, couldn't get access, and then turned to drugs to replace them.
I feel like it's just, today's Grim Reapers, we hear often, very often, big pharma. And, I think that it's almost a boogeyman.
Yeah, I mean, we can't forget all the good things that pharmaceutical companies are doing for us at the moment, but when you have something like that, it's really unfortunate. And that was a really shady kind of backroom thing going on that we're happy was exposed. We just need to see something come out of it.
We need something done, absolutely. But we're going to take a quick break right now.
Election Connection.
Pretty exciting night. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to Live Election Connection.
Welcome back to Election Connection. It's Election Connection.
All of the late-breaking poll numbers and the stories as they develop.
It's okay to talk to the other side. It's okay to work with the other side. We haven't had enough of that.
People will say that this has become one of the most personal campaigns and governor races so far in history.
The Republican candidate shot himself in the foot.
I don't know if she's desperate.
Tonight's a very, very important night because the balance of power can shift.
First of all, if they have a child here, it's an anchor baby. That child's an American citizen.
Anchor baby.
Right. Well, that's the legal name for it.
I'd like to call it a baby.
You're not going to like what I'm going to say.
No, it doesn't matter whether I like it. What's going to happen?
Clay Cope, he's a very staunch defender of the Second Amendment.
So tonight I'm going to be giving an overall analysis of the current outlook of the election.
We're going to go to a caller right now.
Your live and local source.
Live Election Connection.
Election Connection.
So, David, what do you think the biggest thing we're going to see out of this election cycle is?
Time will tell. I don't know. I mean, people are really arguing about whether there's going to be a blue wave or a red wave. I don't see the possibility of a red wave being too high, but we could certainly see higher Republican turnout than many people are expecting.
Yeah, and Jackie, what do you think?
Well, we'll know within 2 weeks the answer to that question. But I think this entire election is, as we said, a referendum on Donald Trump.
I definitely agree. I feel like we're going to see a lot of the national status in our local elections. We're going to see people coming to the polls either because they're really for the left, really for the right, or they really just want to vote their conscience and they want to vote for something new. Maybe they're voting for, the reason that their parents vote this way, their coworkers vote that way, but I think we're going to see a very big turnout in voters.
I hope you're right.
I hope I'm right too.
Yeah.
That's really what we need. We really need voter confidence again.
And it's definitely shaping up that way. A lot of the polls coming out right now are showing that enthusiasm among Republicans, Democrats, and independents is at one of the highest points it's been in a long time. So,
yay for our democracy.
Yeah, for once.
And this is Election Connection, Western Connecticut State University's live news election coverage. I'm Jason Ferenzi.
And I'm Jackie Guzda. Join us next week from 7 to 9 p.m. over Spectrum 192, Comcast Xfinity 97, and streaming over www.wcsu.edu/live.
I'm David Kuhn. Thank you for watching Western Connecticut State University's Election Connection live news and election coverage.